So I can see, Rupi, we're not content with telling us that diesel's going to go down at midnight and that our economy is growing and we're out of a recession. You had to just tell us about tax, just to like...
Just throw a spanner in the work, cat amongst pigeons,
exactly.
if you will say. And it's true, that's what we have to do. The taxman, you don't want them knocking on your door. You want to be able to have your affairs in order before they do that, Sally.
Very true.
And that's what we're focusing on this hour. Taxpayers have been urged to make use of a call made by the South African Revenue Service to fix their tax affairs before the Revenue Services comes for them and potentially face legal troubles. Joining us to speak about this and more, we've got Keith Engel, who's the CEO of the South African Institute of Tax Professionals. A very good evening to you, Keith, and thanks for joining us at this hour. Let's start with that very issue that SARS has alerted us to, in that many people wait until the taxman is knocking on their doors before they start getting their affairs in order. How big of a problem do we have here in South Africa when it comes to taxpayers and this?
Look, I think tax compliance has improved. Every country has problems with the number of people who don't want to pay tax. So I don't think we have an unusually bad taxpayer base. But yes, there are those who don't pay because they don't think they're going to get caught. And those people are finding it more and more difficult these days because the Revenue Service has improved its game probably better than it's ever been before.
No, that's absolutely correct. And I think another component here is that SARS then says that if they do come knocking on the doors of taxpayers who are avoiding their duties as tax-paying or working citizens, they could face legal action as well. What would this legal action look like, Keith? Because one would think if I get caught, I can just pay you back and everything's back in order.
Yeah, well, I guess there are two ways to go about it. I think where SARS has been improving a lot is before they were going after people who were mostly compliant, but increasingly they're picking up undisclosed income. So before it was, they were arguing about the income that you reported. But now they're saying, well, wait a minute, we have ways of finding out that you are not telling the truth and that you're not disclosing your income. And that's what's been in the newspapers lately. It's been going on for a while, that they now have third-party data and other sources to confirm. They say, well, you reported you're only making 100 or 200 or 300,000 Rand, but we know that from our other data that you're actually making more money elsewhere. And now they're saying, you better disclose that to us before we find out. Now, if they come knocking on your door first, they can charge you much higher penalties. Penalties can range, 50, 100%. Other things they can do is go after you criminally. Now, if you come forward to the Revenue Service in a number of different ways, you can avoid all those penalties. So if you think, if you're going to get caught out, it's better to come forward before they knock on the door. Once they knock on the door, then the penalties and the criminal sanctions could apply. But if you come forward voluntarily, then those things are often waived, and then you pay the tax plus interest. And that's been the process for a while, but now the real issue is the stick for SARS has gotten a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, if you do find as a consumer that you are going to go and you're going to show the alternative sources of income that you have made and you are willing to pay the taxes on those after previously not doing so, is there a payment plan that could be developed between yourselves and the Revenue Service to say, I don't have 50,000 Rand to pay in taxes plus interest, but I am willing to pay in installments over a period of time? Is that possible for taxpayers to have that conversation with the Revenue Service?
Yes, it's very possible. There are a number of people who actually are doing that, so that what happens is you come forward and you say, look, I'm going to pay, but I don't have the money. Because the problem, unfortunately, is if you haven't paid your taxes for a number of years, or it's a large amount of money, you don't have the money in the bank anymore. So SARS tends to be fairly willing to negotiate if you come forward and say, look, I'm going to have a payment plan and we're going to stick to it. I'm actually sitting in the house of a colleague, Johan Boysen, who does this. There are others in sight who do this. And the bottom line is if you come forward and you're genuine, they're willing to work out a good payment plan, but you have to stick to it. So, and that's quite common. The Revenue Service is definitely willing to negotiate in that regard.
And then just a final thought from you, Keith, the avenues that taxpayers could approach to avoid having the taxman knock on their door. I'm probably sure the website would be one of them, but can they walk into buildings, and what other avenues are there for them?
Usually the best way to do it, if you're going to come with an offer and compromise, is I would use a practitioner. And there are a number of practitioners out there that do this. And then you come forward through their official channels, you mail it into the right office, or you go to the branch office. I think you probably, because you're not sure, I always think it's better to have representation on these kind of things. There's too much money at stake. To do this yourself, you're going to mess it up. Look, you can come directly to SARS and do it, but I think you're much better if you have some help in that regard. And the fees usually are fairly reasonable, and they can help you out. And there are a number of people around the country who do this. You'll see the number of them on LinkedIn and elsewhere. People say they're talking about deferred payment plans specifically. But the SARS does have a process. You probably, on the website, there is a way of going in, or you can go to a branch office and do it. But I would suggest you have some advice.
Thank you so much for those insights, Keith Engel, joining us this evening, telling us, or reminding us rather, how to get your tax affairs in order. And if you don't, you definitely don't want the taxman knocking on your door, because the penalties, as you've just heard there, will be quite severe.